Well, I'll hold the last key to unlocking this review. Well, let's give it a try. Hey, what's up, you guys? Film Fan 0599 here again, and today we're going to review Insidious: The Last Key. So, Insidious: The Last Key stars Lin Shaye, and what this film is basically about. It's about, Lin Shaye's character. She gets a call that this man is experiencing hauntings and stuff like that, and the house that he's experienced hauntings in was her old home when she was a child, and there were some weird things that, were in that house when she was a child, and very much left her haunted and scarred. But she decides to go back to that house to basically finish off whatever was in that house. And yeah, that's basically what this film is about. And what did I think of Insidious: The Last Key? Now, I didn't have much expectations going into it because I've only seen the original Insidious, which is a great horror film. I really do love the original Insidious a lot. It's a really fantastic horror film. I haven't seen 2 or 3. I heard 2 was okay, and I heard the third one was actually pretty solid, actually. So, yeah, and this one was supposed to be a prequel, so I was like, oh, so I don't really need to see 2 and 3 right away, since this is taking place before any of those events. So, yeah, but it just kind of looked okay from the trailers. Didn't look terrible, but it just looked kind of mediocre, honestly, from all the trailers. And yeah, it was exactly that. It's pretty mediocre. I will say this: it actually wasn't for a good portion of the movie. For a good half of the film, it honestly really wasn't mediocre. I was actually somewhat enjoying it, honestly. I was actually invested into the movie, but once a certain thing happens in the movie, it kind of loses its steam, and it just keeps on going downward and downward. As it keeps on going, it just gets more and more boring, and honestly more and more ridiculous as it goes along, and then just ends up being just kind of a forgettable movie, honestly. I really did enjoy Insidious: The Last Key. It's really not that good. And for a movie that started off pretty good, and then just downward into mediocrity, kind of sucks. I hate it when movies do that. But it unfortunately happened with this film. But let's get into my positives. And my positives are, first being the acting. The acting is actually pretty good, actually. Honestly, it's probably the best thing about this movie. Not going to lie to you. It honestly is. Like, it's not like Academy Award-worthy acting or anything, but it was pretty good. I actually did like the acting in this movie. I thought the characters were actually pretty good, honestly. I did like Lin Shaye. Lin Shaye was great. I do think she gave the best performance out of anybody in the entire film. She was fantastic in the movie. I really enjoyed her a lot. Did really care for her character in the film a lot. She was really good in my opinion. Same goes with the 2 sidekicks, who I thought I wasn't going to like, honestly, because I know how these characters are in these types of horror films. But they were actually enjoyable, like, especially, like, the almost, buffier looking Andrew WK lookalike. Like, he was actually enjoyable. He actually had me laughing at points, honestly. Like, I enjoyed those characters way more than I should have, honestly. And they honestly were just kind of a bright spot in what was supposed to be like a dark movie and stuff like that. So I did enjoy them, actually. I enjoyed them a lot more than I thought I would. So yeah. And everyone else is really good too. The acting, like I said, probably the best thing about the movie, to be honest with you. Like I said, it isn't like ungodly amazing or anything, but it is good. It is pretty good, especially for a 4th installment to a horror franchise. Being in the first week of January, it's good to see that it actually has good acting. So yeah, the acting is actually pretty good. There are moments in the film where it is scary, that I did feel the intensity, and I was like, oh, where's this gonna go and whatever. So yeah, there are moments like that in the film. The the directing, sorry, the writing isn't too bad, honestly. I really didn't think the writing was too bad with the film either. Um, the directing is really solid, actually. I did think the directing was actually pretty solid with the movie. Like I said, had some really nice directing to it. Very well shot, honestly. Editing is actually pretty good, and the cinematography isn't too bad either. Like, this movie actually had some solid directing behind it, honestly, and I really did think the movie actually had some pretty good directing to it. So, yeah, good job on that. Yeah, so the directing wasn't too bad. Let's see, the movie does. I will say, like I said, I enjoyed the movie for a good majority of it. Like, it's like the first act. I want to say, like, the first act of the movie was good. I liked it. I was into it. I was interested to see where it would go. But once a certain thing happens, that's when the movie loses its steam. Well, I can't spoil it really, but once a certain thing happens, the movie just, it kind of ruins the movie, and it kind of goes downward from there. And I was just like, really? But I will say, the first act of the movie was actually surprisingly enjoyable. I was invested into the story, and I was into it, honestly. So, yeah, I'll give the movie props for that. I was enjoying it for, like, the first half of it, but, but once a certain thing happens, it just kind of, goes down from there. And I did actually kind of like the creature design. Also, I will say that the creature design with the creature in the movie was actually pretty cool too. So I'll give them that as well. Now the negatives. There are negatives I do have with this movie. First being the movie. Like I said, the story just gets so disinteresting after after that certain thing happens. It just really does. Like, I'm not into it as much, honestly. It just becomes rather boring. And I just wasn't nearly as into it as I was in the first act of it. And it just becomes boring and just kind of just drags, honestly. Some of the I will admit, there is one character in this movie that they poorly develop. Honestly, like, it's just like, you find out a certain thing about this character, it's just out of nowhere, like, wait, what? Like, it's just so, like, thrown into there for the sake of the plot, and it's just like, wait a minute. Like, it's just so poorly developed, and it's like, what? And I just really didn't think they did a good job with that. Like, some elements of this movie can be poorly developed in terms of, like, things that are just like, oh yeah, this is there too, and this happens as well. Like, really? Like, it's just, sometimes the development can be poor with some things, like with certain characters or with certain story elements. So, yeah, sometimes some certain things can be poorly developed. The movie does do your typical jump scares, like your typical horror jump scares that you would see. Like I said, there are moments in this movie where it actually is terrifying, but there are other moments too where they just do the typical, oh, it's just a loud noise. It's someone just right there. Like, they do that in the movie, which I didn't really like. Honestly, I hate it when horror films do that. Like, those typical cop-out jump scares. I hate them because it's just like, why? Honestly. And the movie does get really cliche. Like, I will admit, like, the movie, there are certain elements I saw coming, and I was like, yeah, it's pretty cliche, honestly. Like, it really does. Like, there are some moments in the film where it is pretty cliche, honestly. I'm like, I know where this is going. And the movie, there are elements, like, especially during the third act of the movie where it gets, honestly, really ridiculous. I'm just like, what the hell is going on? Like, it's like, it does get ridiculous at a point in the movie. I'm just like, okay, like, it's just, yeah, there is a point in the film where it just gets beyond ridiculous. I'm just like, okay. So, yeah, and lastly, like I said, the movie does get pretty boring after the first act of the film. And I was just sitting there like, can we just move it along and just end this movie already? So, yeah, overall, Insidious, The Last Key, I was hoping to be surprised, I was hearing somewhat decent reviews about it, so I was like, oh, maybe this might be not too bad as I imagine it might have been, you know what I mean? And unfortunately, it just ended up what I expected it to be, just mediocre at best. You know, if the movie kept up with what it was doing in the first act of the film, then I could have said that this was a solid horror film. But honestly, like I said, after that certain event happens, just the movie just gets so disinteresting. I'm not really enjoying it as much. So aside from my official grade on Insidious, The Last Key, and my official grade on Insidious, The Last Key is a C+. Like I said, it's an alright movie. It's pretty forgettable, honestly. I think a lot of people will just forget about this movie within the first month, honestly. Like, it's just one of those movies that they just were like, oh, we need to throw in a horror film for the beginning of January, and it was this movie, honestly. So, yeah, it's really not that great of a film, and I really didn't enjoy it all that much. So, yeah, Insidious The Last Key gets a C+. So, if you have seen Insidious The Last Key, what did you think of it? Leave it in the comment section below. And I'm FilmFan0599, and we will see you out later. Peace.